you go. Thank you so much, everyone, for coming to another session of our Tuesday Times Roundtable. Usually introduce the speakers, but today we are having an open conversation. She's gonna talk a little bit about her background. We're really excited to have her. But before we get to that, a couple of things. For those that are medallion students, come see me or Ingrid at the end so we can sign your points. If there are any honors college students, I don't know if you know, but for starting now, since last Tuesday, we can give honors points for attending these sessions. What else? We have a couple of things from our office going on. One is our transformation trip to DC. This is a really fun trip in which a couple of students, we take a couple of, about 5 students to DC, and we go and meet with different governmental organizations and nonprofit organizations, and they tell a little bit about how different backgrounds and diversity are useful in any type of field, and especially in the humanitarian field. For those of you, you don't have to be a Global Learning Medallion student to sign up. We only have until the 31st. Basically, you have to, it says enter the transformation contest and share through artistic or informational media how you have been transformed by an international or intercultural experience. So basically, it goes right along with today's topic. We want you to use your artistic side to show us an international experience that has changed your life. It can be last year we have sculpture, we have poetry, we have written word. This year we have some submissions that are photography. So however you rather express yourself, please feel free, apply. Don't be afraid, it's fun. And again, it's welcome to everyone. So I definitely want you to apply. Again, Ana Menendez from the Humanities Catch, she's here. She's taking the time to be here, so we are really, really appreciative. Feel free to ask as many questions as you may have, and please join me in giving her a warm welcome.
Thank you so much, Florencia, and thank you for inviting me to this wonderful session. I'm going to get from behind the podium because I'd like to make it more informal. I guess I can use this that'll work for the camera. Okay. So we have a small enough group that I'd like to just get to know where you're from, what I know we have alumni and professors are invited and students are invited, so just get a sense of who you are and what you are studying or what you studied. We can start up there. For me. Engineering, okay. Welcome. Yes, here. Okay. Interdisciplinary studies, okay, at FIU. Great, thank you. Languages, okay, like modern languages or, yeah. Okay, that's awesome. That's great. Okay, thank you. Yeah. Community psychology, okay. Fine arts, wonderful. Yeah. Okay, international business, all right. Okay, great, thank you. Liberal studies, okay, wonderful, yeah.
Hi, my name is Magda. I'm a senior and I'm studying
Political science, okay, excellent.
My name is Jacob. I'm from England.
And chemistry, okay. Nice varied group here. Did I miss anybody? It's a varied group. I'm going to speak to everyone, obviously, but I am primarily, my job here at FIU is as director of a grant, Mellon-funded program that promotes the humanities. So I'm going to be talking a lot about the humanities, and I'll explain why, not just because it's my job to do it, but because I really It's defined my life, and I believe in it, and I think that it's something that speaks to the chemists and the political scientists and all of us, not just the people studying fine arts. Although I hope by the end of this short session that you will feel even more sure of what you're studying. And so I'll give you a little bit of background about myself. My name is Ana Menendez. I've been a bunch of things. I've had a very varied career, and I attribute that to my humanities background. I'm an FIU alum. I graduated from here many, many years ago. I started here 30 years ago, if you can believe that. And my parents were very conservative. They didn't let me go away to college. So I was very lucky to stay here at FIU. I don't know if any of you are in that same position, probably some of the women maybe. But I got a very good education here. And then right after college, I studied English literature. I was an English literature major. And this was at the end of the 80s, and everybody was a little bit worried because everybody at that time was studying marketing and business. My parents were worried. My family are professional doctors and lawyers, and they don't understand really the arts except as something you dabble in. Could be a nice hobby, but not something that you actually pursue as a career. My father is an engineer. And right after I graduated, I got a clerkship at the Miami Herald in Broward, and I started working there. So I started my career kind of on a whim. I just saw this opening, I applied, I got the job. This will define the rest of my life in a lot of ways. I see something that looks kind of interesting, I do it, and then it becomes a career. And so I was a journalist for some years. I was here at the Miami Herald, and then I covered Little Havana. It was one of the things I covered, transportation. And then I moved to California to work there at the Orange County Register, where I covered education. And then I kind of burned out on journalism, even though I was, by this time, only in my late 20s, and decided that I wanted to go away to college now that I could, because I was 27 years old and I could do what I wanted. And I got accepted to NYU's MFA program, which was wonderful. So another humanities degree. I'm not going to bore you with the whole trajectory of my career, but I'll tell you that I've lived on 4 different continents. I have been a photographer. I've been a war correspondent. I've been what else have I done? I have been a professor. I started a creative writing program at Maastricht University. I've been a writer, primarily. I've written 4 books of fiction, 2 short story collections, and 2 novels. And now I'm a program director, running a grant. So I learned, at my late age, I learned all about Excel. I do Qualtrics applications. In fact, I came running from just finishing a Qualtrics RSVP form. So I've done a bunch of different things in my life, and I really attribute that to the flexibility that my education in the humanities gave me. And why I say that is because we're at a moment now where the humanities are, especially among immigrant families like my own, not as valued. And those of us who decide to pursue it sometimes feel pressure to study something practical. And so my main message today is that, we live in a really uncertain time when it comes to work, right? Robots are going to take over just about every kind of career. One of the careers that one of my aunts had, which was very remunerative, was she was a radiologist. They look at X-rays and MRIs and stuff to find disease. That really is a job that now the computers can do better. Right? So all those people who were saying, study radiology like your aunt, look at how well she's doing, those careers are going to be gone, right? So we're living in a really uncertain time, and everybody has an idea of what the future holds, right? Everybody has an idea of what's going to save you. And I'm here to tell you that the only thing that's going to save you is joy, right? The future belongs to joy. Whatever brings you joy in your work, if it's engineering, if it's business, if it's fine arts, that is where your future lies. Because when we work with joy, we apply ourselves extra hours, we study up on the thing that we're doing, we are completely immersed in it in a way that we cannot be when we don't work with joy. And, you know, a lot of us are really, really smart, and we could do a lot of different things, right? I know a lot of really smart people who studied something other than what brought them joy, and they were able to make a decent living, and they're still making a decent living, but they're living without joy. And so they're never going to be the top. They can do it competently, but they're never going to be at the top of their game. So just a quick quiz, and I really want to open this up to a discussion, but a quick quiz about what do you think people studied? So Clarence Thomas, you all know Clarence Thomas, Supreme Court judge. What do you think he majored in undergraduate? Does anybody know? Yeah. Close. He was an English literature major, Clarence Thomas. Okay. How about Hank Paulson? Everybody know Hank Paulson is a former Treasury Secretary. Treasury Secretary. What did he major in? Any guesses? You can kind of meta game this now, right? It's an English bachelor's degree, Hank Paulson. Sonia Sotomayor, another Supreme Court justice. She majored in history. A lot of lawyers, a lot of people who go on to become judges major in history. Ron DeSantis, our current governor of Florida. Anybody know what his BA was in? Take a guess. History. He's a history major, right? We need to start lobbying him a little bit better, I think. So there was a wonderful article recently in the New Yorker about the decline of historical thinking, where Eric Alterman makes the point that he's an editor with The Nation, but he makes the point that everybody talks about inequalities of wealth, and he's worried about intellectual inequalities. And what he means by that is not that some people are smarter than others, but that some people are being prepared to make sense of the world they're living in, and some people are not. And so something like history, which really situates you in the world. I was at an event with Richard Blanco the other night, and he made this wonderful point that we all are born, and we kind of wake up into this story, and we think it's the beginning of the story, and we don't realize it's the middle of the story, right? That we're in the middle of a story, that a lot of narrative came before us, and a lot of narrative will come after us. And that's what history does. It situates you in that story, right? And the study of history gives you the tools by where you can analyze the time you're living in. And unfortunately, history majors are falling across the country. Fewer and fewer people are majoring in history. This took a especially big dive after the economic crisis of 2008, where you got the sense that families were saying, you better major in something that's going to, give you some money and make you some money. Where are history majors climbing? Where do you think history majors, the study of history, is most robust? Any guesses? Where? In law? Yeah, but what kind of institutions? There are some universities that are seeing a surge in history majors at the undergraduate level. Columbia, Yale, Ivy League. The elite institutions, these majors, these humanities majors, are thriving, right? And so this poses some uncomfortable questions for us as a society, right? Are the arts, are the humanities simply elite pursuits, right? And are the elites the ones that we're training with the tools that we need in order to make sense of history and to make sense of the world that we live in, right? These are questions that are very important for this generation to consider, right? And by saying them, I'm not meaning to disparage other majors, right? Because let's go back to that original quote that I have for you, which is, the future belongs to joy. So if you find joy in business, then we need you, right? The tribe needs everybody. The tribe needs engineers, and the tribe needs doctors and business people and real estate agents and everybody. But if your joy lies in art or in history or in English literature, and you're not pursuing it because of something you've heard or something somebody's told you or out of fear, remember that the rich folks at Yale are studying it if they want to, right? And they're the ones who are going to end up running the world, as always, right? They're going to have the tools to do so. And it's just something to keep in mind. And it's something to tell your parents when they say, wow, you should do something practical, right? Everything that you love, you'll find a way to make it practical. And I'm a perfect example of that. My family was not wealthy by any means, and I have made a very comfortable living in a really exciting and interesting life, thanks to pursuing what it was that I liked, right? Because I love to read, I love to write, and therefore I spend a lot of time on that. And whatever you spend a lot of time on, you just become better. Right? This is true of no matter what you pursue. Right? If what you like is tinkering and doing mechanical stuff, you will become a better and better and better engineer or designer or inventor. If you don't like it and you're studying it because somebody told you this was the job of the future, then you're just not going to spend any time on it. Right? So that's my primary message, sort of takeaway for today that I wanted to talk about. But as I said, I do want to open it up to discussion because I'm also interested in hearing from students. We're coming to the end of our grant. We're coming to, this grant was a 3-year grant and it runs out June 30th of this year. And we are in the process of reapplying for another round. And I'm interested in hearing from students about what they need or what they want from the humanities and what they want from a humanities education. I'll tell you a little bit about our program, and then I'd like to open it up for questions. But we do a bunch of different things. And just to give you an example of things that we've done here in this last, in our 3rd year of the grant, we have a summer bridge program that we offer to humanities transfers from MDC because the grant primarily is here to support transfers in the humanities from the 2-year institution, which is Miami-Dade College, to FIU. And so we hold a big summer bridge program for them in the summer where we take them to museum visits, we give them drawing lessons, we help them with research. It's a very full program. Florencia has been wonderful in being supportive and being a part of that program as well, letting students know what kinds of careers they can have in the humanities, for example. We also do outreach to public schools where we have funded some grants for people to go out and reach children who are interested in the humanities and for some reason may not think that it's worthy of pursuit. We also fund collaborative research grants. We have faculty development seminars. But one of the things that I'm most proud of in this particular program is our internships. And the grant originally asked us for to fund 10 internships a year. We've funded many, many more. We placed 15 interns in fall of 2019, and we have another 10 scheduled now in the spring. And we've also shared 10 internships with Miami-Dade students. So they're very important to me because it shows students that what they're studying, history, English, philosophy, will get them really interesting jobs. And so they've been placed at the PAM, they've been placed at the Wolfsonian, at the FIU Frost Museum, and they've also worked on research with faculty. So at this point, I'd like to just open it up to questions about anything, about careers, about future, about study, about how you can combine humanities with whatever it is that you are studying now. Yeah.
Hello. Hello, Magda again. I guess not a question, but more like a experience or observation. I feel like maybe one of the reasons why I feel like culture plays a big role and maybe in the reason why like the humanities majors are declining. Like I know I'm Haitian. So in our culture, you know, your family looks like they want you to be lawyers or engineers or doctor, something that like when you get out of school, you can secure like a 4 3 figure job. So I feel like that could be plays a big
Yeah,
role.
absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that is a big, and as I said, that factored into when I was going to college. My uncle is a doctor. He's a general practitioner. He's retired now, but he used to love to write stories on the side. He wrote these kind of fabulous stories, and that's what you did, right? I mean, it's like you're going to study that. I mean, that's what your uncle does on the side, right? It's not considered in a lot of cultures, and I think the Cuban culture is to a great extent. Even though both of these cultures, Caribbean culture, is full of art, right, and poetry. But for some reason, it's relegated to this sort of other realm, right? And it's not considered sometimes, not by everybody, but sometimes it's not considered worthy of serious study. And that's really unfortunate because I think to people who have not studied the humanities, they don't realize how much you get out of them. This is not why we study them, right? But you do pick up skills that are incredibly useful in life. And in other careers. One of them is the ability to take huge quantities of data and make sense of it and synthesize it and share it, right? And apply it to what you're doing. And this is no small feat. I mean, think about when you first started your first research paper, whether it was in middle school or in high school, how daunting they seemed, right? Because you have so much to read. Where do you stop? And how do you make sense of it? And what's important? And what sort of argument can you make? And the humanities trains you to do that. And so it's really helped me in this job now, which is an administrative job. All of my writer friends were warning me not to take this job, that I would never write again, that I'd become this drone. And it's really the contrary. I find that it's a very creative work. And that my ability to take large quantities of information, be it survey results, articles, focus groups, and turn it into usable information that we can implement. And this can be difficult. I've seen people struggle with this. And I chalk it up directly to the kind of training that I received as an English literature major, where you had to read huge quantities of data and make sense of it. And that helped me as a reporter as well. You go out into the field and you have one day to get your story. So you have to decide really quickly what's important, who's trying to snow you, what's true, cross-check it, and sit down and write. And that's just one day to do it. And that really, doing that over and over again, trains your mind so that if you become a lawyer, or if you become a doctor, or if you become an engineer, right? You have that training, that focused kind of ability to apply learning to solve immediate problems. And it's too bad that we're not getting that message out to our own cultures, right? That it's not a matter of, oh, you're just going to be reading all day, right? Or you're just going to be drawing little paintings, right? It's not that. You are immersing yourself in a really disciplined study that organizes the mind, right? And there was I just posted something on I can't. I wish I had the name at hand now, but a person who was a big manager at a corporation, and he would scream, "Get me poets as managers," right? Which sounds like a joke, but he really did want poets as managers. And one of the events that we held here at FIU was a conversation with Carolina Garcia Jayaram, who was the CEO of the National Young Arts Foundation. So this is a CEO who's making $1 million plus to be CEO of this foundation. Guess what her undergraduate major was? It's the worst. If you were to say this to one of our families, it's the worst. She's a poetry major. She's a poetry major. We don't even have that major at FIU anymore. She was a poetry major. And I asked her, I said, what did you get out of being a poetry major? Because, of course, then she went to law school, right? But I said, what did you get out of poetry major? And she said, she knew immediately what it was. She said, I was able to be concise about what was important in a particular situation. And that's a huge talent in these times when we're bombarded by information. To be able to distill it into a couple of lines that are moving and powerful, that's a huge talent, right? It's like a superpower. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, and the back and forth with the dialogue. Yeah, yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, I think a lot has been spoken about like social sciences versus like more practical subjects like business and sciences, but not much has been spoken of like the arts specifically, because one thing that really strikes me is that like I have a lot of friends who are music majors, and I think when a subject like that is so undervalued, then it turns into this feedback loop where it becomes underfunded and it becomes more competitive. And the arts are always the ones that are hardest hit by the cutbacks, and it becomes such a competitive and stressful environment that like for me, playing piano is something that brings me joy, but I feel like if I studied it at that level, it would turn into something that brings me like stress and anxiety. And I see a lot of people who are in, the arts, like music, and because it's such a competitive and stressful environment, because of the way society places this value on things that will earn money, they feel the need to be these like very high-performing, concert pianists or bust. And so it turns into this kind of nightmarish environment that I can't kind of imagine actually studying, and I think it would ruin any enjoyment that the topic brings me. So I think it's really important to enable like access for students who maybe don't necessarily want to study music, but want to keep it a part of their lives and ensure that people can have that side of themselves, because that's the way we encourage well-rounded individuals, but also like make it a less stressful and difficult environment for people who choose to study these like so-called softer subjects. Yeah,
that's a really good point, actually. And I it's certainly the case with me, right? I mean, when I loved reading, so writing came as part of that. And my first two books I was able to live on for a while. But the publishing industry has changed so much that a lot of us who write, especially literary fiction, if we're not writing, spy dramas or some really popular kind of genre, we have to have other kinds of jobs, right? And that's okay, right? We're able to do many things, right? But it's a very good point that you bring up about funding and this feedback loop that develops, because what society values is where society puts its money. It's where it gets more out of whatever it's putting its money into, and it becomes lopsided. And it's specifically this problem that the Mellon Foundation was trying to address with this grant that they gave FIU and MDC jointly, because they saw all of the money and all of the emphasis going to the STEM careers. Again, I'm not dissing the STEM careers. My whole family is in those careers. And we need them, right? And we need really good people in them. But when you're taking people who don't want to do that, then you have a problem, right? When people whose joy lies elsewhere and they feel that's where there's only money there, then you get a problem. Then you get a society that is susceptible to propaganda, that is susceptible to ahistorical thinking and to demagoguery. And the Mellon Foundation saw that they, as a foundation with money, needed to support. I'm speaking on behalf of the Mellon Foundation, which is not it's above my pay grade. But they saw that there was a need to put money where their mouth was, right? They're trying to promote the humanities as an antidote to hysteria and mass hysteria. And so that's why it was a $3 million grant that has helped a lot of students, I think. And so that's all we can do, right, is step by step and person by person to make sure that we have a break on that trend.
So I remember hearing back in my undergrad quite an interesting thing, which is that, because they charge basically humanities majors and science majors the same amount, humanities majors end up subsidizing the STEM majors who need these very expensive pieces of equipment and all this technology. And that feels very unfair, because it ties back into this whole thing of if the arts are less profitable but also less expensive to study in many ways,
Right.
and people are having to take out these like ridiculous loans, that increases the stress on people in less profitable degrees to subsidize, STEM majors who are paying the same amount for higher prospects to work with more expensive equipment
Yeah.
on a more expensive degree. That's not equitable in
Yeah,
many ways.
That's a really good point. I'll say this also, because a lot of people have the idea that if you study, say, English or history or one of the humanities, that you're not going to be making as much money as STEM majors. And there's been some really interesting research that's come out on this. And it's true that right out of college, STEM majors make more money. Right, right out of college, like the years directly out of college. But interestingly enough, 20 years down the road, it's the humanities majors who are making more money. Why? Because for a couple of reasons, and this is what the research has suggested, is that the STEM majors are worth a lot when the technology is still fresh, right? The technology that they've studied in college is still fresh. It's really great. They go, they apply it. But the value of that tends to decline as technology moves forward without them, right? So if you're not constantly going to school and keeping that up, the humanities majors who've studied these more broad subjects and acquired broad kind of, I call them kind of clay-like skills, right? That allow you. In some ways, the sciences, when you study them, they're much more brittle, right? You get a couple of facts, and they tend to be more brittle. They're not as moldable to other fields, right? If you study, something like, I don't want to use engineering, but engineering is actually a good example. If you study something like engineering, you're going to be an engineer, right? If you study something like history, there's a whole bunch of different things that you can mold yourself into. And that tends to favor long-term career building. And so by 20 years into their careers, the humanities majors are making more money than the STEM majors. Now, the problem with that also is that when you're making a lot of money at the beginning with the STEM careers, you're making compound interest on your salary. As a friend of mine pointed out, they're like, oh, the compound interest of those first 20 years. But it goes back to this idea of if you don't like it, right? If you don't want to study in these fields, then you can rest in the assurance that your love of the humanities will serve you throughout the length of your career. Right? You can take the long view.
Anna, sorry, I wanted to share, and I usually don't do this, but because it's right in line what you were talking. And the article that we have for today, it was basically saying that STEM careers right away, they got that sprint when it comes to salary, but then at some point, those that study humanities catch up. And here's kind of another reason why he says, why do the earnings of liberal arts majors catch up? It's not because poetry suddenly pays the bills. Mid-career salaries are highest in management and business occupations, as well as professions requiring advanced degrees, such as law. Liberal arts majors are more likely than STEM graduates to enter in those fields. A traditional liberal arts curriculum includes subjects like philosophy and literature that seemingly have little relevance in the modern workplace. Yet, many of those skills are the most desired by employers. These skills are also quite abstract. And on that, I'll share an experience from our transformation trip from last year. We went and we met with the chief technology officer of the World Bank, okay? So we went into one of the 11 buildings the World Bank has in DC. We met with this super high up executive and his background, his bachelor. I can't remember if it was English or what, but his bachelor was in the humanities. Mm-hmm. And he explained, he was really impressed with our contents and the poetry and everything the students did. He was really impressed by how they were able to talk about immigration or a global international story through art in different forms. And he said that for him, that was so important that he had that background because it gives him that extra cultural perspective. So when he needs to make decisions, or when he needs to imply technology, he by default, he takes into considerations the different cultures or the different aspects of cultures or where those technologies are going to be implemented. So that broad spectrum is not that narrow thinking, and is that broadness that is very desirable, I guess.
Yeah, the humanities is the study of human culture and art and behavior to some extent. And, New Coke is a really good example. A lot of you are probably too young to remember the New Coke fiasco. But Coke, when was this, in the 80s? Something like that? I don't remember now. But they changed the formula. And they found that in the test groups, everybody preferred the new formula. It was tastier and everybody liked it. But then when they rolled it out, people were outraged. It's like, don't mess with my Coke. And what happened was that they got the science right? They got the science part of the new Coca-Cola formula correct, but they forgot to take into account the human aspect of it, the emotional aspect of it, and flopped miserably for that reason. And so absolutely, you'll find that many CEOs, and this is a fun project for you to do when you have time, but many CEOs are actually liberal arts majors of one stripe or another. Michael Eisner, who used to be the CEO for Walt Disney, anybody know what he studied? English literature and drama. That was his major. And we have a whole list of these. Carly Fiorina, the former CEO of Hewlett Packard, medieval history and philosophy. That's what she studied. So there's a whole line of these authors and critics you would expect, but Jim Leach, who was a former U.S. representative, studied Soviet affairs, right? Basically political science and history, what he studied. So many examples of people who Elena Kagan was a history and philosophy. Conan O'Brien studied American history and American literature, right? Something you would expect of an entertainer, maybe, but nobody's saying that he's starving to death now, I don't think.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes.
My name is Maida, and I thank you for speaking about the humanities. And my question is, so I'm studying agricultural sciences here at FIU, and it's a Bachelor of Science. But when I was in high school, I did art for 4 years. Mm-hmm. So I don't know how you see it from your perspective in your career, but I've seen a lot of, there's like the person was saying in the back with like the grayish sweater that, there's a lot of like, it's either STEM or humanities, but there's never like the convergence of both. And I'm wondering how you see that from your perspective, because it feels like both have merit, but they're not using each other's strengths. Mm-hmm. And as someone who's like in a STEM field, but is also like in programs, like in international programs that's doing like transdisciplinary research, for example, that is incorporating the humanities, because you can't do research on people without people who right. work with people. Does that make sense? Like, is there a movement towards that as well? Because it still seems very binary. Yeah, no, you're absolutely right. And I think to a large extent, it really is a false dichotomy. It's a false choice between STEM and humanities and pitting the two against each other. Unfortunately, that's the way that's the world that funding has created, right? Where most of the funding and most of the attention has gone to STEM, ignoring the fact that Einstein was one of our most creative thinkers, right? And that you cannot have the sciences without the kind of looseness and joy and playfulness and deep understanding of the human experience that the humanities promote, right? You cannot have that. The best scientists are humanists and can tell stories, right? When you think of a field such as anthropology, archaeology, those are storytellers. Right? I mean, it's based on science, obviously, and it's based on things that they can quantify. But you are telling stories. You're telling stories about what you glean from the record, and so I think it is important to keep this in mind.
and to help create a society that understands that, right? Because right now that dichotomy is in place because of the economic situation, right? Because of where the funding attention goes. And that's true across the board. That's true at FIU as well, unfortunately. When I took this job, one of the people said, oh, you know, people are sick of initiatives and they might not want to participate in this. And somebody else said to me, are you kidding? These humanities professors have been so ignored and so underfunded that they'll be thrilled. And that's exactly what happened, right? When we open up any kind of contest or any kind of money or funding for anything, we're overwhelmed with applications. There's a thirst for it because the funding is not there. And so, you know, it's partly on all of us to keep what you just said at the forefront of what we do and to share it, yeah, because we really we don't go forward as a civilization in our silos, right? And when you look at a place like the Fin de Siècle Vienna, where you had all of the disciplines coming together and some of the most revolutionary thinking in the arts and in the sciences took place because of these. You had psychotherapists coming in. You had artists like Klimt working. You had incredible doctors involved, and they would all get together and talk. And this is what gave that society and really what followed of the modern world all of its power was that kind of what we would call today interdisciplinary collaboration. Yeah.
Hi. Sorry, I want to apologize. I may have missed the majority of your presentation because I found out about this event late. I did make sure to read the article, though, and about Humanities Ed, so
Okay.
I'm hoping my question's still topical. I mean, I heard the last bit of what you were saying. It seems to me you're primarily making an argument about the humanities as helping people in their careers. And by the way, I think that that's true, but you know, it makes me think about this sort of larger meta debate about what an education is actually for, right? I mean, you know, John Dewey, who we've named the Dewey Decimal System after, said a liberal arts education is not just training for skills and for a career, it's to make you, a better citizen, and we could even argue a better human being, right?
Yeah.
So doesn't educate, I'm just saying, I mean, everybody needs to make money, I get that, but, you know, it's about more than just the kind of career you can build from that education. And the other thing, you know, I find fascinating this whole discussion about STEM and everything today, but it's not new. I'm sure you're familiar with C.P. Snow, who wrote in the 1950s, The Two Cultures. This kind of, what I would call debate has been, because C.P. Snow basically argued, okay, in the university we have the sciences, which can actually prove that they're saying, and then we have the humanities, which is all bullshit. I mean, I'm basically distilling his argument. That's basically more or less what he argued. So he sort of said the humanities is this kind of bizarre stepchild within the university system. So on the one hand, yes, everybody's been talking about STEM. By the way, the former governor, who's now our senator, Rick Scott, by the way, I happen to teach in anthropology. You know what he said was the worst possible major you could go into? He named it. He said anthropology because it's totally useless, right? But these attitudes aren't new. I think they go back to the 1950s.
I think so too. We all introduced ourselves. Can you tell me what discipline you're in?
Sociocultural studies. I teach anthropology.
Yeah. Okay. Great. Thank you for joining us. No, absolutely. I mean, I think. You know, my fellow humanists get into this. You know, you were very polite about it. I mean, people get into almost fistfights over this. Over the humanities does not need justification. It's a study, you know, that's worthy for its own sake. The arts are worthy of pursuit for their own sake.
So maybe the humanities doesn't scientifically prove things, but that doesn't mean we don't prove things.
Right. Right. It's the lie that tells the truth. Right. No, and you know, this idea that if we bring in careers or if we start talking about making money, we're kind of sullying this pure art, this sort of pure realm, and this gets a lot of traction, and it's a sticky debate to get into, and I try to avoid it, but I avoid it by saying that I don't believe in the dichotomy, right? I don't believe the humanities are either for career training or for value in and of themselves, right? They are everything. They are both, right? I mean, there's a very well-known professor, or he was affiliated with FIU, I'm not going to name him by name, but he gave a talk recently here about, this, emphasis on digital humanities is horrible, and getting involved in politics is horrible, and talking about careers is horrible, and this is a person who has a very nice cushy job as a professor here, right? And so it's a little bit disingenuous, right, for the academies, high priests to say we're just about the purity of art. All right, so I don't like to get into that, but of course I agree. I agree that it is both. It is a pursuit that's worthy in itself. It helps, and I think probably the Mellon Foundation who funded us would agree, it helps promote citizenship. It helps with, personal joy and meaning. I mean, the humanities gives meaning to our lives and helps us make sense of the time that we live in. And also, if you happen to love it, it will also help you in whatever path you choose to be able to live, right? Because, capitalism is the sea we swim in, right? And it can't be denied. And so my point is that you study it because it's worthy of itself. It's a pursuit that brings your life meaning, that brings you joy in the day-to-day, which is no small thing to have. I've been very fortunate that I've always been able to work with joy, and not a lot of people can say that, while at the same time ensuring that you're not going to starve. And I say that only because too many parents, my own included, you missed the first part of the story, are worried that if their children study these things that brings them so much joy, it's almost like it's a certain amount of jealousy also, I think, a certain amount of like, how dare you be so happy doing something, right? And I think that there's this feeling that it's only going to pay you if you're suffering, right? Or if it's only worth doing if you're suffering at it. And I say you can pursue these joyful things because they bring meaning and because they're important, and also because they will support you in that life that you're leading. And this piece by Eric Alterman that I had mentioned in the beginning makes that point. He says, I'll read this. Yes, we have a responsibility to train for the world of employment, but are we educating for life? And without historical knowledge, you are not ready for life, right? That's one of the quotes in this piece. It's a really great piece. You can look it up. It came out in the New Yorker on February 4th of last year. It's called The Decline of Historical Thinking. And it talks about how the decline in history is found in almost all ethnic and racial groups and among men and women, right? And that the only place where it is surging is at the elite institutions at Yale and so forth. And so they do make that point. And I was at a convening of the Mellon Foundation late last year, where people made the same point, right? Whenever the conversation started to gear too much towards career training, there was always some wise person who brought it back and said, okay, let's remember why we're here, right? And I think that's just a personal calibration that each person needs to make when you're studying these fields. You find that balance within your own practice. And it's an important one to keep at the forefront of the discussion, but it doesn't mean that it precludes one or the other, right? It doesn't mean that you study the humanities and then have to become a monk and live on ramen, right? Any more than it means you study the humanities because you're going to be mega rich, right? You are somewhere in that continuum of finding meaning, doing good, and getting paid for it. Yeah. Thank you.
Just a question. I was kind of hesitant. What exactly does the grant fund? Is it just for DC students or FIU students involved as well? What exactly do you fund here for?
Yes, thank you for asking about the grant. The grant is primarily to support transfer students from Miami-Dade College to FIU in the humanities, but we also do a lot with FIU students in the humanities. So, for example, mark your calendars, because March 18th, all day till Wednesday, we're holding FIU's first. I mean, this is amazing that FIU has never had a career fair for humanities students. They have career fairs. We hold career fairs in general, and we hold career fairs for other things. But this is a career fair just for humanities students. So it's going to be March 18th. It's going to be in the Graham Center ballrooms. The morning is going to be a series of panels and breakout sessions, such as how to talk to your parents and other significant others about your decision to study the humanities. We're going to have advisors there talking about what to study and how to prepare for your education. Richard Blanco is going to be in conversation with one of our faculty about how to talk about studying the humanities with people. And we're also going to have a big panel with different career paths in the humanities. So we'll have a professional, we'll have the professorial, the academic path, the scholarly path, we'll have the praxis path, right? The actual artist. We'll have all those represented in that panel. And then the afternoon, lunch will be provided, lunch will be free. And then in the afternoon, we'll have the career fair where we'll have employers who are specifically interested in hiring humanities students will be there to answer questions, take your resumes, and all of that. And so that's something that we're holding, that we're funding through the grant. It's a really big deal. We're hoping for a lot of people, and MDC students will also be part of that. We're also going to be holding things like we're working with the Honors College to hold a kind of a mental health fair, where we'll have workshops on managing stress, managing your health, those sorts of things. So we do those programs as well. Yeah.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Anybody else?
And if you have any ideas for the second iteration of the grant, please write to me. You can find my email there on the Humanities Edge website, but it's anmenen@fiu.edu. But if you just Google my name, you'll be able to find it. Yeah. Thank you. Any other questions? I don't know how we're doing on time. We have like 4 minutes. So, yeah. Mm-hmm.
Basically, my name's Sarah. I'm an interdisciplinary liberal arts student. The movie Forrest Gump came out when I was 7 years old, but I was too young to understand it and everything. But my dad, he always learned history. He's always watching the History Channel. My grandfather was in World War II, Korea, and Vietnam, so my dad was very into history and what his father was doing at those times, the Great Depression and all that my grandparents grew up in. But when I saw Forrest Gump as an adult, my dad was able to actually sit down with me and explain all of these historical and cultural events that had taken place as he was growing up in the 60s and 70s, and things that I would have never known happened because they didn't really teach them in school. And I found out that film had actually had such a cultural impact on America that Congress had actually entered it into the Library of Congress as a representation of that decade for the 60s. And I feel like we're missing a lot of that in entertainment these days. People want to watch The Greatest Catch, or they want to watch American Idol, and I feel like if the media would able to focus more on cultural things that have happened, and everybody loves Saving Private Ryan, and things like that. But I feel like they're so far and few between that we need more of those in America.
Well, there's your calling.
Yeah, and I just feel like there's so many amazing things out there that people have never even heard of, and I think that we could always use more of those. So, yeah.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
That's right. There's you found your calling. I think that that's one of the things that I think isn't emphasized enough in career talks and in career planning is, we're very concerned with the self, right? What do I want? What's going to protect me? And we don't think enough about what will be of use, right? It sounds like a kind of an old-fashioned, maybe mystical way to orient your life, but I think it's a much fuller way of looking at your studies. How can you be of use, right? And not, what can I get out of this world? And, what's this world going to give to me? But how can I be of use? What's missing in the world? More historical, good drama, right? What's missing in the world that I can fill? How can I address a shortcoming, a hole in society, in the civil realm that only I can fill? And I think that when you approach your work and your career life from that perspective, you set yourself up to live with a lot more meaning, which in and of itself will bring you more joy than being focused on just what you need. Right? Thank you. Okay, I think we've come exactly to 1:30. I don't want to. I'm really strict for time when I'm doing my events, so I never like to run over either. But thank you so much. If you all want to be in touch, as I said, my contact information is up there on that Humanities Edge website. I'm especially interested in ideas that you have for programming for the next iteration of the grant, workshops that you think are missing that would do students in the humanities some good. And I'd love to hear from you and any comments or anything that you have. So thank you very much for sharing this lunch with me, and thank you,
Thank you
Francia, for
so
the
much for
invitation.
taking the time. Thank you.